At 3 o'clock in the morning on July the 3rd, 1996, DJ Dana Rollins was driving along the desolate Ferry Reach Road in Bermuda when his headlights caught something dark sprawled across the pavement. His first thought was that he had encountered roadkill, perhaps a large animal struck by a passing vehicle. But as he slowed down and his high beams illuminated the scene more clearly, a wave of horror washed over him. This was no animal. It was a young woman curled in a fetal position, her face covered in blood and tears. She couldn't speak, couldn't scream. All that escaped her lips were desperate, choking gasps for help. Dana rushed to her side, gripping her hand tightly, promising her that help was coming, that she would be okay. But even as he spoke those words, he could feel her body growing colder, her breathing more shallow. The girl lying on that dark road was Rebecca Middleton, just 17 years old, and the paradise island of Bermuda had just become her grave. Welcome to another investigation into one of the most disturbing failures of justice in modern history. This is the story of Rebecca Middleton, a promising young Canadian student whose dream vacation turned into an unspeakable nightmare, and how a broken legal system allowed her killers to walk free. I'm your host, and today we're examining the Rebecca Middleton murder case from 1990s, a case that still haunts Bermuda to this day. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss our coverage of true crime cases that demand to be remembered. Rebecca Middleton was a vibrant 17-year-old high school student from Belleville, Ontario, Canada. She was in her junior year, known among her teachers and classmates as responsible, intelligent, and full of life. Rebecca wasn't just a good student. She was the kind of young woman who balanced her academics with genuine kindness toward others. Her best friend was Jasmine Meany, and the two girls had been inseparable since childhood. They shared secrets, dreams, and plans for the future that seemed bright and limitless. As a reward for Rebecca's excellent academic performance, her parents, Dave and Cindy Middleton, decided to give her a special gift, a 6-week summer vacation to Bermuda with Jasmine. It was meant to be the trip of a lifetime, a chance for Rebecca to relax, enjoy the sun, and make memories before her final year of high school. The girls arrived in Bermuda excited and eager to explore. They stayed with Jasmine's father, Rick Meany, who lived on the island. Rick was protective of the girls, as any responsible guardian would be. He established strict rules, a 1 a.m. curfew, no riding motorcycles, and never go anywhere alone. The girls understood these weren't arbitrary restrictions. They were common-sense safety measures in an unfamiliar place. On the evening of July 2nd, 1996, Rebecca and Jasmine decided to go out for the night. They headed to the White Horse Tavern, a popular local bar, to meet up with some male friends they had made during their stay. The atmosphere was lively, the music was loud, and the girls were having fun. Time slipped away from them. By the time they realized how late it had gotten, they had already missed their 1 a.m. curfew. Panic set in. They were afraid of getting in trouble with Rick, so instead of calling him for a ride, they decided to try calling a taxi. For over an hour, they stood on the street corner, making phone call after phone call, but no taxi came. It was around 3 a.m. when 3 men on 2 motorcycles pulled up beside them. One man, identified only as Dean, was riding alone. He offered to give Jasmine a ride home. The other motorcycle carried 2 men, Kirk Mundy, a 21-year-old local, and Justice Smith, who was just 17. They approached Rebecca. The girls hesitated. They knew they shouldn't accept rides from strangers, especially on motorcycles, which Rick had explicitly forbidden. But desperation clouded their judgment. They were exhausted, scared of the consequences of staying out all night, and saw no other option. Reluctantly, they agreed. Dean took off with Jasmine, heading in the direction of Rick's house. But something went wrong. The motorcycle carrying Rebecca with Mundy and Smith suddenly accelerated, turned in a completely different direction, and disappeared into the darkness. Jasmine watched in confusion and mounting fear as her best friend vanished from sight. When Jasmine arrived home, she immediately told her father what had happened. Rick Meaney's concern turned to alarm. He and Jasmine got in the car and began searching the streets of Bermuda, driving up and down the roads calling out Rebecca's name. Hours passed with no sign of her. They went to the police to file a missing person report, but were told that Rebecca hadn't been missing long enough that they needed to wait 24 hours. Rick argued, pleaded, but the police were firm in their policy. All they could do was continue searching and pray that Rebecca was safe somewhere, perhaps at a friend's house, and would turn up soon. She never did. While Rick and Jasmine were desperately searching the island, Rebecca was enduring the most horrific moments of her young life. On that isolated stretch of Ferry Reach Road, she was brutally sexually assaulted and then stabbed more than 30 times in the neck and chest. Her attackers left her on the side of the road like discarded trash, bleeding and dying alone in the darkness. When Dana Rollins found her just after 3 a.m., she was barely clinging to life. She couldn't tell him who had done this to her. She couldn't give him any information. All she could do was gasp for air as her life slipped away. Emergency services arrived within minutes, but it was too late. Rebecca Middleton was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation began immediately. Crime scene technicians documented the horrific evidence, multiple stab wounds, signs of sexual assault, and Rebecca's personal belongings scattered nearby. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was deliberate, brutal, and personal. When Rick Meaney arrived at the crime scene and was asked to identify the body inside the black body bag, he collapsed in grief. The girl he had promised to protect, the daughter of his dear friends, was gone. The Bermuda police launched an investigation, and within days they had identified their suspects, Kirk Mundy and Justice Smith, the two men who had taken Rebecca on that motorcycle. Jasmine provided their descriptions, and witnesses from the White Horse Tavern corroborated the timeline. The evidence seemed clear. Both men were brought in for questioning. During interrogation, the police made a decision that would haunt this case forever. They believed, based on initial statements and circumstantial evidence, that Justice Smith was the primary perpetrator of the sexual assault, and that Kirk Mundy was merely an accomplice. Operating under this assumption, they offered Mundy a plea deal. If he agreed to testify against Smith, he would only be charged as an accessory after the fact, a significantly lesser charge that carried a maximum sentence of just a few years. Mundy accepted the deal. He admitted to being present during the attack, but claimed that Smith was the one who raped and murdered Rebecca. Based on Mundy's testimony, Justice Smith was charged with murder and sexual assault. Then came the forensic evidence. DNA samples taken from Rebecca's body were processed and analyzed. The results were devastating to the prosecution's theory. The DNA evidence conclusively proved that it was Kirk Mundy, not Justice Smith, who had sexually assaulted Rebecca. Mundy was the rapist. He was the one whose DNA was found on the victim. The police had made a catastrophic error in judgment, but there was a problem. Under Bermuda law, which follows British common law principles, a person cannot be tried twice for the same offence. This is known as double jeopardy. Because Mundy had already entered a plea agreement and been convicted as an accessory after the fact, he could not be retried for rape or murder, even though the DNA evidence now proved he was the primary perpetrator. The deal was done. The court's hands were tied. Kirk Mundy was sentenced to just 5 years in prison for being an accessory after the fact in Rebecca's murder. As for Justice Smith, the prosecution's case fell apart. Without Mundy's testimony being credible, and with no physical DNA evidence linking Smith to the sexual assault, the Crown could not prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Smith had raped Rebecca. While there was evidence he was present at the scene, his exact role in the murder could not be definitively established. In a stunning turn of events, Justice Smith was acquitted of all charges. He walked out of the courtroom a free man. The Middleton family was shattered. Their daughter had been tortured, raped, and murdered, and her killers were either serving minimal sentences or walking free. They filed a lawsuit against the Bermuda government, arguing that the police investigation had been negligent and that the plea deal with Mundy had been made recklessly without waiting for forensic evidence. The lawsuit dragged on for years. In the end, the Middleton family was awarded a settlement of just $2,840. $2,840 for the life of their 17-year-old daughter. Kirk Mundy served his 5-year sentence for accessory after the fact. He was later convicted in a separate armed robbery case and served an additional 15 years in prison. Upon his release, he was deported to Jamaica, his country of birth. He has never faced justice for raping and murdering Rebecca Middleton. Justice Smith, after his acquittal, continued living in Bermuda. In 2003, 7 years after Rebecca's murder, he was arrested and convicted for attacking another woman with a weapon. He served just 18 months in prison for that offense. To this day, he has never been held accountable for what happened to Rebecca on Ferry Reach Road. Dana Rollins, the DJ who found Rebecca dying on the road that terrible morning, carried the trauma of that night with him for years. When his daughter was born, he named her Rebecca, in honor of the girl whose hand he held as she took her last breaths. He wanted to make sure that Rebecca Middleton would never be forgotten. Dave and Cindy Middleton spent decades fighting for justice for their daughter, speaking out against the failures of the Bermuda legal system and advocating for reforms to prevent such miscarriages of justice in the future. Their grief never faded. Their daughter left for what should have been a safe, supervised vacation and came home in a coffin. No amount of money, no apology, no legal reform could ever bring Rebecca back or ease the agony of losing her in such a horrific way. The Rebecca Middleton case remains one of the most egregious failures of the criminal justice system in modern history. It serves as a stark reminder that the pursuit of justice requires not only diligent investigation, but also the courage to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even when it contradicts initial assumptions. The legal protections designed to prevent wrongful convictions, such as double jeopardy, must be balanced with the rights of victims and their families to see true accountability. This case teaches us that procedural shortcuts and premature plea deals can have irreversible consequences. When investigators rushed to judgment and offered a deal to the wrong person, they inadvertently ensured that a rapist and murderer would never face appropriate punishment. Rebecca Middleton deserved better. Her family deserved better. And every future victim of crime deserves a system that prioritizes truth evidence and justice above expedience. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe the legal system failed? Rebecca Middleton and her family? What reforms do you think could prevent such tragedies in the future? Please share your views in the comments based on the facts presented. And if you want to stay informed about more true crime cases that expose the flaws and triumphs of our justice system, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, and remember, justice delayed is justice denied, but justice perverted is an even greater tragedy.